Good afternoon and welcome to That Eurovision podcast, Eurovision with a slice of life. And as you know, this is Tim and this is not Rory. Unfortunately, Rory is Maruv leg kicking his way through Manchester today. So unfortunately, he can't be here today. I'm doing very well. It's the end of the month, so that means we're just one more month away until Eurovision New Year begins, and I'm kind of excited. Joining me is
Jazzi. I'm really excited for Eurovision New Year to just kick off. We're literally a month away now, so it's so close and so close to a new season and a new season with such a expanded team. And hopefully this year we will be there in Italy.
And hey, it's Rosie. I'm kind of not prepared to say goodbye to the old year yet. Just before we've started recording this, I've been putting our awards up on our website. So please go vote in the That Eurovision Site awards, including the Monzalmolo Award for Aesthetic Excellence and others. Please go vote in those. But otherwise, I'm pretty good. And looking forward to discussing today's country.
And I'm also here. Hi, I'm Lewis. I'm Rosie's partner, and I'm very hyped for today's country. It is one very close to my heart. But yeah, I've been loving the Olympics as well at the moment. I think it's a very different competition, but you know, it's just so much fun.
And San Marino getting their first ever medals.
Yay!
And the Philippines getting their first ever gold, I think, Tim.
Woo! Yes. She's gotten so much money out of it.
I don't blame her.
I won't lie when I say I've got it on mute right now because GB about to go, as we're recording, are about to go in like a 400 times.
Hi, Bradley here. I am doing very well. It's the day after payday. I have been scraping through the month of July to get to here, and I'm trying my best not to blow all of my money on like the one day on holidays or something. But like everyone else, I'm absolutely hyped for Eurovision New Year, and I can't wait to discuss today's country with everyone.
Okay, we are all here and we are all well. For today, we are going to go back to our country retrospectives and we are going to go up top, but Eastern. So we're going to go to the Baltics and we are going to go to Latvia. This is actually Lewis's stan country, so that's why he said he was so excited about the country that we're going to talk about today. You know what? Latvia hasn't got that much of it. Well, they've got some history. They debuted in 2000 with Brainstorm and My Star, which placed third. And then a couple of years later, they've had their first and only win with Marie N with I Wanna. And you know what? Since their debut, they have participated in the competition and have always been present regardless. So we are going to go around the table and talk about, everyone's favorite entry from Latvia. So I'm going to let you guys take it away.
I would definitely say that my favorite entry from Latvia has to be their debut entry, Brainstorm My Star. I just think that it's such a sweet and wholesome entry, and it's so like melodic and like just fun to listen to. And I won't lie, I would probably say it should probably have won in 2000. Now I know it's quite a bold statement to say a country should have won on their debut entry, but I do think this is the best song in 2000. Other than Denmark, I do think it's probably aged the best. Definitely among the Eurovision fans anyway, from that year. And yeah, I would definitely say it's their best entry in my opinion. I think other entries that I really, really enjoy would be Heartbeat and Samantha Tina's. Both Samantha Tina's entries, Still Breathing and The Moon is Rising. I know that will be The Moon is Rising is a little bit controversial, but personally, I really, really like the studio cut. I think this had potential to be Latvia's best entry for me, but live it didn't quite hit the mark the way that I wanted it to. But I still enjoy listening to the studio version nevertheless, and yeah.
Yeah, I listened to them all again last night. Well, 3 a.m. And I've got a little list. I won't start with my favorite, but my sort of top three, starting from third, is I know it's going to be it's really basic for like people that think they're different to like Love Injected, but I'd really enjoy Love Injected. I don't know if I'd say it should have won. I think sixth place, maybe top five would have been a good position for it. But I just love the atmosphere that it brings. Strangely, second place is Carousel with That Night. Was a no qualifier, but I really love the sort of sound that it brings. You know, that sort of and again, like Jazzy, my number one is Brainstorm, My Star. I do think this, out of all of their entries, deserves to be their winner. I think it deserves it more than I wanna. It's one of the only Eurovision songs that I listen to that isn't sort of out with Eurovision. It's in my non-Eurovision playlist. And yeah, I guess it's because I sort of grew up. I'm not to age myself, but I was born in 1995, and my uncle, my family would listen to this sort of music, sort of twee indie pop, and it's really sort of common at that time in Britain and especially in Scotland. You know, it just reminds me of bands like Travis and Belle and Sebastian, that sort of sound. So yeah, I absolutely love it. But I'll let other people talk a bit more about their favorites.
I think Bradley's definitely mentioned one of probably my most underrated favorites from Latvia, which is Carousels That Night. I just think it's so understated and atmospheric, and I think it's really beautiful. I can understand why it didn't qualify. It doesn't have a particularly strong immediate impact, but I think at what it does, it's fantastic. Jazzy's mentioned another one, Yeasts with Heartbeats. I love that sort of very austere pop sound, and Yeast's voice is so unique and powerful to listen to. And I'm also going to give some love to Laura Risotto with Funny Girl. Again, I understand why it didn't qualify. It was just a really strong semi, but she gave a very polished, dramatic, emotional performance of that song. And I'm also going to give another shout to Samantha Tina. Both of her entries, Still Breathing, definitely took me a little bit of time to get used to. But once I was sort of used to her sound and what she was trying to do with it, I really fell in love with it and felt very much the same continuation of that with The Moon Is Rising as well. Yeah, didn't quite work live, but it's a huge shame. I really would have loved to have seen that in the final, but maybe we'll see her again someday. No, who knows?
Yeah, and I'm actually going to take a bit of a rogue stance with my favorite songs. I think everyone's been talking about the really melodic and atmospheric some sounds from Latvia, and I do love those as well. Brainstorm's fantastic. I think quick mention to Funny Girl, which nobody else has mentioned up to now, and I think it's a really it's a surprisingly dark, beautiful song, and I think it works really well and was kind of lost in 2018. But my favorites from Latvia are actually completely the opposite, and are 2006's vocal Cosmos with I Hear Your Heart, and 2014 Cake to Bake, which anyone who knows me, I deeply love Cake to Bake. It is one of my favorite Eurovision songs of all time. It says something about how good 2014 was to what was, that for me it's only my second favorite song from that year. But I think it's a song that doesn't really work if you just listen to like a sample from it, but listening to the full thing, it's just such a positive, creative, beautiful, light, funny song. I just love it. And with I Hear Your Heart, I do like a cappella, and I think it's not the kind of thing you typically hear at Eurovision. And again, it's a very upbeat, enthusiastic song, and also ridiculously catchy. It has been it has been stuck in my head for the last 3 days. Ever since I started re-listening to Latvia to prepare for this episode. So yeah, those are my two favorite songs. But honestly, trying to pick my favorite song from Latvia is a bit like picking my favorite children. Like
we have children.
Yeah, a fun fact actually about Cosmos is I Hear Your Heart from 2006. That was the year that the wee guy from Mon Zimmerlo's Heroes video made an appearance at Eurovision.
Ah,
It's one fun fact that gets to know then. Okay, then, well, I think mine's gonna be a bit of a mixture. One of them, my third place, I'd say, is of course, I have to pay homage to Marie N because she gave them a good win, and it's one of those ones where you don't really need big production to make it work and for you to win. She just literally took something so simple as like, changing clothes in the middle of the stage, and it worked.
I mean, Bucks Fizz did it first.
Yeah, Bucks Fizz did it first, but yeah, then that happened. The second one, I don't think anyone's mentioned this, but Pirates of the Sea. Just because, like,
Yes.
I didn't think I would like this, and then when Eurovision again happened, and then they did it, and then after that, all I get is like, where the hi ho, where the. I can see why it qualified, and I can see why everyone was just like, like singing along to it. And you know what? It was so catchy, and it was in my head for a few weeks. And my main winner would be, just very basic of me. It's Love Injected. It was the start of the rebirth for Latvia after God knows how many years they've had a string of non-qualifications from 2009 to 2014. And, Aminata just injected some sort of life to Latvia in the competition. And I think that's why it worked so well. Like it nearly won its semi. And, juries loved it so much. I think it nearly won the jury vote as well in the grand final. And we weren't aware of it until after it was revealed. So, but yeah, that's our favorite entries in Latvia. Looking at the way Latvia selects their Eurovision entries, they've had a mixture of both. They've had 3 national finals. You had Edo Diesma. Sorry for those that I butchered the way I said that, from 2000 2012. And you got Diesma between 2013 to 2014. And of course, everyone's favorite Supernova from 2015 and 2020. Of course, they gave Samantina her chance and internally selected her for 2021. Giving this to the floor, what do you think of Latvia's selection methods for the contest, seeing as they've had a bit of a mixed bag in regards to results?
I feel like when they first started using Supernova in 2015, it really worked for them because obviously they got the best result they'd had in years with Aminata's Love Injected. And then they kind of built on that with Heartbeat, where I think they came about 16th, which for Latvia in recent years is still a really, really good result. And then it's kind of petered out. I do think Samantha Tina had a really good chance of qualifying in Rotterdam had the contest gone ahead in 2020. I do think it was different. It was nothing like we'd seen before in the contest. And I do think, even though I personally prefer The Moon is Rising as a song, I do think Samantha Tina had a stronger performance in the national final with Still Breathing than she did in Rotterdam with The Moon is Rising. And I think had she taken her Supernova performance to 2020, I do think she would have made the final, or at very least almost made the final. I don't think she'd have came last in Rotterdam with Still Breathing. And I think there's improvements that need to be made because I think this is the fourth contest in a row they've missed the final, so there definitely needs to be some changes made because they're on a bit of a non-qualification streak. I don't know if they need to bring new people in or they need to change up their format, but I think they need to look at their neighbours in Lithuania who changed up their format to their national final very, very slightly. And are now getting decentish results. I think the Root came 8th. Donny Montel did well. Eva in 2018 did quite well. So whenever Lithuania have a little bit of a dip, they change up something. And I think if Latvia took a leaf out of that book, I think we could see some changes for Latvia too. And I don't think they're a lost cause in Eurovision. I think any country can do well with the right song. So yeah, I don't know if they'll get a win anytime soon, but to see them back in the top 10 would be really, really nice because I felt like in 2015 we had this thing where it's like, oh, could Latvia win soon? But then it's kind of just not happened, which I think is a bit sad.
I think you bring up a really good point there, which is Love Injected is objectively a good song, but I kind of hate it for the direction it sent Latvia in. I think ever since 2015, they've kind of seen Love Injected as the model for their Eurovision entries going forward. This very polished, darker, melodic sound, and I think that while that's produced some great songs, it's taken away from what I personally really liked about Latvia, and from what made them my stan country, which is that before 2015, every time Latvia was on stage, they were just having the best time, just ridiculously having so enthusiastic, so just happy to be there. Not always the great singers, not always the greatest singers live, but incredible performers. I think it's no coincidence that that I Wanna was their winner, because that's a song where the real strength of it is in the performance. And to me, I think pre-2015, that's what Latvia shone at. And yeah, I think since 2015, possibly because of the changes to the qualification, possibly just because of a desire to emulate Love Injected, they've been moving in a different direction, and it's not one I'm as big a fan of.
I think the thing that I sort of pick up on when I look at Latvia's entries is that whatever they do, they really commit to it. And that's something, even if I don't personally like all of the entries, I still really appreciate that about them. And I feel like that's probably the most effective route for them to go down. I think Lewis has a really good point in that Love Injected has almost been seen as this sort of pinnacle of performance that they almost need to live up to. And it's something we talked about in the Belgium episode, where they've sort of done really well with one song and then sort of tried to emulate it. And Cyprus is similar. Other countries as well, I'm sure, have sort of the entry that really works for them, that really clicks for them, and then they sort of try to emulate it and it doesn't ever quite work out to be as good. And I do think we've started to see them go in some slightly more different directions. I think Carousel and Samantha Tina were both very much artists that brought something unique to Latvia's Eurovision canon. But I think they really need to move away from the legacy of Aminata, who is fantastic. I mean, she didn't just perform Love Injected. She wrote Heartbeat. She wrote Still Breathing. Did she write The Moon is Rising as well? Was she on the writer team for that? Yeah, she was on the writing team for The Moon is Rising as well. So I think her influences cannot be understated, but I think possibly becoming a little bit more sort of artist-led, artist-driven, and trying to sort of, I don't want to go back into the authenticity thing because we keep doing it on this podcast. And I also don't think they're not doing that. Like, I do think Carousel and Samantha Tina and Laura Risotto and everyone else they've sent have been doing stuff that is authentic to them. But I think there's so much more variety out there, and they've always sent such huge variety in terms of genres and in terms of artists, and I think they can take risks.
Okay, for me, looking at the way they've selected their entries, I know that when they see that, okay, it's not working anymore, they just shut it. But you know what? Supernova is actually quite a good competition. And all I'd say to that is little things can have a big impact. Look at I'm gonna be basic here and pick on Melo just because I'm that person. In 2014 they had like, Sound and Nielsen came third. I think they were really itching for a win and then a win. And then look what happened. They made that one little change, just like, okay, less artists overall, but more songs in the final. And that little change has somehow worked for them, because it doesn't mean that you need to have quality over quantity. I think Latvia was going in that direction in 2020, where I think they didn't even have the semifinals for Supernova, and it was going in the right direction. Then that thing happened. I'm not going to mention it, but yeah, even in 2020, looking at it, they had a good help of people selecting the song. So it's more of using their resources in a more efficient manner rather than just relying on, I don't want to say it like, the legacy that is Aminata, as much as she's a great person. And I think everyone wants to keep that bit of her. And I think Latvia needs to see what it's like without her, because they've done it before. Didn't quite well, but it is what it is. And I think that's just what they need to do going forward. Have, still keep Supernova, but have some sort of changes to it, maybe. Anyone got anything to add to this before we move on?
Yeah, I think as Lewis said, 2015 really set them in a certain direction, where they're sort of vying and sort of battling with Belgium for a dark and polished look. Not to talk about the last episode I was on, but yes. And it has, in the battle of the avant-garde, dark, edgy countries, they're losing. Compared to Belgium, it's just not working for them. And it's not that I don't like the entries from the past few years since 2015. I do listen to them, I do enjoy them, but I don't think they are better than Belgium. And it's interesting to see. I'm not one who actually follows national finals too much, unlike a few people on this podcast who are obsessed with them. But I think it's really interesting that Supernova, since 2015, there is a risk when you do a national final that you resort to gimmicks. Maybe that's just a British thing when we do national finals, or even Ireland. But that hasn't really happened for Latvia. They've really stuck with the same sort of vibe that I get from their entries. Maybe there's a bit of a difference between the entries. They're not all the same, but none of them are gimmicky or like trying to wow the viewer into voting for them. So I think that is interesting that they do the national final in a way that doesn't resort to that.
Okay, well, we already talked about, what our thoughts are on the way they select them. Now let's put it on the flip side by looking at, okay, they've won once, um, which seems like a lifetime ago, and currently they're on their fourth consecutive non-qualification. And the last time they've had the longest non-qualifying streak was between 2009 and 2014. And I'm sad to say that LTV is close to matching that again if they don't do anything. My question would be, in your perspective, how do you think they can improve this and get back to the final, or even better, how do you think they can get their second win?
I don't think there's any guaranteed thing that they can do, that there's any specific direction that they can take, or change to the judging process that they can do to guarantee getting back in the qualifications, because I do think one thing about Latvia's entries, both since 2016 and between 2009 and 2014, is that they were all quite unique. It's not like it's not like they're Cyprus, where they're where they're trying to recapture this this one specific song between 2009 and 2014. But I think the best thing the best thing they can do is, as Rosie said a bit earlier, is go in a more artist-driven direction. I realize I'm contradicting myself slightly, but move away from trying to recapture the style of Love Injected, and just trust in the artists they're sending. I would say would be my change of direction for them.
I think for me, probably what I would say is almost sort of recapture what I said earlier, that they always commit to whatever it is they're doing. I wouldn't say they are quite as risk-takey as a country like Georgia, who really do send a huge diversity of entries. I think Latvia does tend to stay a little more mainstream, which some ways can play in its favor and in some ways can prevent it from standing out a little bit. So I think it is, making sure that your entries do really stand out on stage, that they do have that uniqueness to them. It's definitely a fine balance, trying to get that balance between uniqueness and alienation for audiences. And we've seen so many countries try and do it over the last sort of 5 years or so, certainly. Some have done it incredibly well, Portugal 2017, for example, and others have not done it very well. So Georgia 2018, as much as I absolutely adore that song and it deserved better. So I think finding that really nice balance between still being very unique, very artist driven, and like Lewis said, someone who really loves being on that stage. And I think Samantha Tina really did capture that. It just sort of slightly detracted from the vocal performance. And I think being able to recapture that, like, it's not always going to work, but I think it's got the strongest chance of being able to work.
Yeah, just adding quickly, I do think Samantha Tina is a really good sign for Latvia moving forward. I think even if her results don't really shine well on Latvia by themselves, I think the direction they're going in with Samantha Tina, with this very incredibly powerful artist taking a more unique path than possibly 2015 through 2018, 2019 even. I think that is going to be the best way for Latvia to move forward, and so I am optimistic.
I think there's one thing that Latvia could do is potentially, and I know this sometimes doesn't work for countries, sometimes it doesn't, but I do think it would be a money-saving exercise and would possibly lead to a higher quality song, is to pick an artist internally and then have a national final to select the song. Because I think for Samantha Tina, that could have really worked, because I feel like while people loved her style, some people weren't sure on The Moon Is Rising. And I think if she'd have had a selection of songs to pick from, then maybe she would have done a bit better at Eurovision. And I do think this sometimes pays off for some Eurovision countries. I know that I think Germany did this in 2010 or 2011. And they'd been having some really bad results prior to that. And look at them, they won. So this is a strategy that could work if you're wanting to save money and also wanting to like nail down an artist while still giving like the Latvian public a chance to have an impact, like, and send something that they would really believe in. And but also it would ensure that the artist's involvement was like at a maximum. I wouldn't know who to send because I won't beat around the bush. I don't know that many Latvian artists, but I think this is a strategy that could work for them and could potentially get them back into the final at least. I don't know if it would get them a win like it did for Germany, but it is something they could consider.
Yeah, I think for Latvia, they almost peaked too early. You know, they come into the competition on their debut, finish third, and within 2 years have won it. And it's almost as if after that, they kind of, I don't think they got complacent, but they kind of didn't see the point in maybe trying as hard as they did when they first entered, which I think happens with a lot of new countries that debut. But yeah, a lot of you have suggested, you know, tweaking this and tweaking that and just making small small changes. But my ADHD riddled chaos mind is saying no. Let's scrap everything. Let's go for an internal selection, but have a lot of artist involvement to you know bang the drum, make it authentic. And I don't think that they haven't been authentic in the past 10 years, but I do think that maybe staying internal for next year and sticking to getting artists involved within that process and keeping the song performer and writer as the same person or heavily involved in it could work. But yeah, I don't know what else they could really do apart that hasn't been that's already been suggested. That hasn't been suggested by people here.
I think for me, like, a lot of what everyone has said is, plausible. You can kind of give a reason as to why Latvia should do this, Latvia should do that. And, the hybrid method, like what Jazzi was mentioning earlier, where, internally select an artist and then have a national final for them, it's been a proven method, but it's not always as effective. Look at UMK, where they did that for Sara in 2018. Finland qualified, but they did that in the Rude the year after. It got them one of their worst results. So it's looking at the suitability for them on that instance. I would say that Supernova gives them quite good value just because of the fact that it brings a lot of people in together. So it's not just like, the problem with doing the internal selection would be you're putting your eggs in one basket, and if it doesn't work out in the end, it's kind of like, all of the blame would be put on that person, which is kind of like, it might not be a nice feeling. So, maybe do something. I like the hybrid idea for, just to try it. If it works for them, it works for them. If it doesn't, then move on another idea. All I'll say for Latvia is be open to other ideas, because I think they're just limiting themselves. I think it's just because for transparency and stuff and letting people know, okay, this is what we're doing. It's at least they're aware of it. So I would like them to see something different and hopefully not leave it another 6 years for them to qualify, which they're very close to.
I think like they could try anything, to be honest, because I don't think they really have anything to lose. Like they've already came dead last in 2021, so I don't think they have anything to lose by trying something different next year. It's the only way is up for them. So if there's ever a year to try something different, it's probably 2022.
Okay. Well then hopefully LTV, we'd like to know what your plans are, because it's getting closer to the new year. But before that, what I would like to ask you guys, who would you like to see represent Latvia, not just next year, but in the future as well beyond that?
I would love to see Azramenski back in Eurovision. I love them so much, and it would almost certainly be a terrible idea, but it would be such a good song that I think it would be worth it. It would be worth the sacrifice.
Not next year, because she's only just represented them, but I would love to see Samantha back to just like avenge her result from 2021. Definitely not next year, but say maybe 5 years down the line. I just think it'd be nice to see her come back, avenge her result, because she's wanted to do Eurovision for so many years. Like, it would be so lovely to just see her finally get to that Eurovision final, and I just want it for her. Like, yes, I think she has delivered some of Latvia's best entries in the last few years, in my opinion. But I just want it for her.
Maybe point out before we go on that it actually took her about 6 attempts to get here for her to come dead last in the semifinal, and we're not happy.
Yeah, I don't really know many Latvian artists that haven't already competed. But just for the lols, I would love Brainstorm to come back and represent Latvia. Yeah.
For me, I would round this up. There's one. And shout out if he ever finds this. And I'm just gonna make sure I get the name right before I get butchered. But yeah, he's participated in he's starting to become like the next Marcus Riva, because we all know how many attempts that dude has had. But do shout out to him. But for me, I actually want Edgar Skrilis to actually make it, because it's just a disappointment. Like, his songs are so good, but he just doesn't get through. And, hopefully if they do bring back Supernova in 2022, he comes back and, brings it all in together. Well, that's our thoughts. I would leave this up to the table one last time. Do you guys have a message for LTV if they ever somehow find this?
Take more risks.
Have some fun. Look at your old stuff. It was so much fun. Do that.
Yeah.
I'd say just keep it more authentic to the artist. I think while Aminata is great, I feel like there has been a little bit of a loss in the authenticity of some of the songs. And I think that's definitely a way that Eurovision is going now. So definitely keep it artist-led would be my advice.
Pretty much what Jazzi, Lewis, and Rosie have already said. Be authentic and just have fun and enjoy being part of such an amazing competition. Yeah, just enjoy yourself.
Yeah, and on my final thoughts, I would actually agree with everyone. It's just, don't be afraid to take risks. Like, you've already had, you had the unfortunate, like, fun of, well, not fun, the unfortunate incident of placing last in your semifinal about 5 times now. And, hopefully it doesn't happen in 2022. And, take the moment now to actually write the path and make sure that doesn't happen, and even bring yourself to the final. But in any instance, that's our thoughts for Latvia. I'd like to thank Lewis, Rosie, Bradley, and Jazzi for, coming to join me and just talk about, about the Baltics. But before we go, we have just opened up the TES Awards. As Rosie said early on, we're still not ready to, let go of the current season, and we're giving them a final hurrah in per se. And, just head on over to our site and, vote for your favorites. And, we'll be promoting the hell out of it for the next few weeks. Voting closes on the 21st of August at 12 p.m. Central European time. So, as Albina says, TikTok. And closing off, I just want to say thank you very much for listening. Don't forget to follow That Eurovision Site at That Euro Site on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And also, That Eurovision Podcast at That Euro Podcast. So thank you so much, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.